All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. Now, for those who are planning to see another thriller today at the Rose Bowl between Oregon and Ohio State, they basically simply got a good old fashioned surprise. Why? Because it was domination by the guys from Columbus from the word go. Ohio State took the field today with very bad intentions. And when it was all said and done, we saw the Buckeyes jump out to a 34 to nothing lead in the second quarter as they cruised to the 41 to 21 victory. Plain and simple, the Buckeyes have been a different team since that loss to Michigan to end the regular season. Of course, Ohio State went into that contest looking to win and get to the Big Ten championship game for what was expected to be a rematch with Oregon. Okay. And that was not the case. Ohio State was upset at home, courtesy of Michigan. And, since then, the Buckeyes heard all of it. Their head coach, Ryan Day, heard all of it as well. And, we saw Ohio State dismantle Tennessee in the first round of this playoff. And now they just did the same thing to Oregon this afternoon in Pasadena. You just think about it. The Buckeyes right now are clicking on all cylinders. We just saw Ohio State rack up 500 yards on offense today against one of the top defenses in the nation. And then on top of that, you think about Oregon, you think about their high powered offense. Ohio State limited them to 276 yards and 21 points, which was their second lowest point outburst for this season. This game to me was a prime example of what happens when Ohio State, brings their A game. There's a reason why the Buckeyes began this season ranked second in the nation. So far in this college football playoff, Ohio State has shown that. You think about it. Jeremiah Smith, the phenomenal freshman wide receiver for the Bucks, he set the tone in the first minute of this game with his touchdown pass or touchdown catch rather to put the Buckeyes up by the score of 7-0. And from there, Ohio State was simply off to the races. Jeremiah Smith, he talked about it during the week. He said, listen, if Oregon's going to go one-on-one with me, you know what? They're going to get burnt. And it was one of those. He finished this game today with 7 catches for a $187 with 2 TDs. And honestly, as a whole, all of Ohio State's big stars came out to play today. You think about Will Howard. And, he received a lot of criticism following the loss to Michigan. Will Howard has stepped up big so far for Ohio State in this playoff. And again, today, 17 of 26 for 319 yards. The Buckeyes had 181 yards on the ground. Travion Henderson had 94 yards on just 8 carries and 2 TDs. Quinshon Judkins had 17 carries for 85 yards. Emeka Egbuka had 5 catches for 72 yards. And then you think about this Buckeyes defense. They sacked Oregon quarterback Dylan Gabriel 8 times on this contest. Cody Simon led things with 11 tackles. So it was, it was just one of those everybody in the scarlet and gray was prepared for this contest. To me, you look at it, first things first, you got to give credit to head coach Ryan Day because he had his team ready to play this afternoon in Pasadena. And it's one of those, I'm sure that his haters are still going to have something to complain about. But guess what? All this guy does is win. I know, he hasn't won his last 4 against Michigan. I know that Ohio State has gotten to the playoff before under Ryan Day, but they just haven't won the whole kit and caboodle. I get it, but this guy consistently has his teams among the top teams in college football, and I think the same thing can be said here in 2024. Again, coming into this game, I said, it's difficult to beat a team twice in the season. I know that Texas has fallen to Georgia twice so far this season. And if Texas wants to win a national championship, they might have to face Georgia for a third time. We got to wait and see. But nonetheless, you go back to October when Ohio State and Oregon met in Eugene. It was a 1 point game that the Ducks won. Okay. And it was one of those games, if you're Ohio State, you went back to Columbus after that game feeling like, you know what? We left one on the field right there. And Ohio State made up for it today. I mean, this team clicked on all cylinders from the word go. The bottom line is Dan Lanning's Ducks ran into a buzzsaw this afternoon in Pasadena. And by Ohio State steamrolling Oregon early, it took their ground game out of the equation as the Ducks were really one dimensional. I know that running back Jordan James leaving the game early with an injury, played into that as well. But nonetheless, the Ducks, especially in the first half of this contest, they just seemed slow. Okay. It was kind of like they were in third gear while Ohio State was in fifth gear. Basketball like equivalent is probably like, just jumping like one team just jumping out to a 20 to nothing lead to start the game, and you're playing catch up for the remainder of the contest. And that's what Oregon did today. Before you blinked, they were already down 24 to nothing. And it seemed like every time that Ohio State got the ball, they just kept scoring. They just kept scoring. They just kept scoring. And Oregon could not do anything right. And before, by the time that Oregon did, get a score just before the half to make it 34-8, you kind of had the feeling that the game was over. It was just a matter of how interesting that the Ducks were going to be able to make this game. They did get it to 34-15, but Ohio State at that point, with just one more score, they really put the game out of reach. And again, when you fall down by 34 points, regardless if it's in the first half or not, you really do become one dimensional. And that's what happened with the Ducks against this Ohio State team. So, it's one of those where so far we've seen the lower seeds in all three of these quarterfinal games win. Penn State beat Boise, Texas beat Arizona State today, and Oregon beat Ohio State. Ohio State beat Oregon, rather. So the question is going to be from a lot of people, was this game, especially the Rose Bowl, was this a prime example of seeding issues with the current playoff format? I'll tell you like this, people complained, some people at least, complained about the possibility of Oregon having to face Ohio State in the second round. A lot of people felt like, wow, the Ohio State getting the 8 seed, was pretty low for them. I think, like I've talked about it, and I think other people are gonna have been talking about it as well, is the fact that hey, I think going forward, regardless if it's a 12-team playoff format or the 14-team playoff format, that just because you're a conference champion does not necessarily mean that you are going to get a first round bye. You're going to be one of those top four teams. I'm not saying that Ohio State should have been a top four team, but having them at 8, just due to the fact that you know what, you had to give the 4 highest ranking conference champions a first round bye. I think that changed a lot of things, and because of that, Oregon has basically ran into a buzzsaw today because, like I said before, the Buckeyes went to Pasadena with bad intentions. So another question for me is Ohio State the best remaining team in the playoff? I'll tell you like this. If the Buckeyes are going to play the next 2 games like they played the first 2 games in this playoff, I don't see anybody in this field beating them. Okay, that's the bottom line. It's not to say that Ohio State can't be beat, but as of right now, of the 6 teams or the 5 teams rather that are remaining in this field, nobody is playing better right now in each facet of the game than the Ohio State Buckeyes, and that makes them extremely scary. So now you've got Ohio State that's going to be going into a hostile setting. They're going to face Texas at the Cotton Bowl in the semifinals. And of course, for Texas, there's going to be plenty of folks out there repping the burnt orange in Arlington for that contest. But I don't think Ohio State is going to be intimidated by that. You look at this Buckeyes team and you look at this Longhorns team. You got a scenario like I talked about earlier. Texas, I think They kind of sleepwalk at times. They kind of tend to play to the level of their competition. But I'll tell you like this: if Texas plays like they played today against Arizona State, they're not going to win that game because you look at it, you got a two-headed monster at running back for the Buckeyes with Travion Henderson and Quinshawn Judkins. This Texas defense, they're good in the secondary, and that's going to be important because you got to first and foremost, you're going to have a lot of NFL talent on both sides of the field going at it. This is why games like this, with what we're going to see in the semis from Ohio State and Texas, this is why these 4 and 5 star kids are recruited out of high school to go to these schools. This is why some of these kids are so coveted in the transfer portal to go to these respective schools for games like this. Okay, these are legacy games. These are the career defining games against some of the blue bloods of the sport. So nonetheless, Texas, I know that they're going to have the fans in their corner for that game, but nonetheless, they're going to have to bring their A+ game. Okay, if they're going to go out there and get past Ohio State and get to the championship game. But nonetheless, I think we are in store for a thriller in the Cotton Bowl. Two of the best teams in the nation, two of the blue bloods of the sport, with a spot in the championship game on the line. But nonetheless, like I said before, the Buckeyes went to Pasadena with bad intentions. Sometimes you have to take one step forward to one step backwards, rather, to take 5 steps forward. And I think losing to Michigan was a wake up call for this Buckeye team because if you go back and watch that game that Ohio State lost to Michigan to end the season, the Buckeyes kind of felt like, you know what? If we could just lace them up and get on the field, we'll beat Michigan because they probably looked at Michigan's season and said, you know what, no big thing. But at the end of the day, the Wolverines came to fight and Ohio State paid for it. But I guarantee you that loss woke the Buckeyes up. Tennessee found that out the hard way. And unfortunately for Oregon, they fell in that category today as well. So it's on to the Cotton Bowl for the Buckeyes. And if they keep this up, there's a very good possibility that in this 12-team college football playoff that they are going to be the last team standing. But folks, that is going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank each and every one of you for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. I want to take this time out to thank all of you fine folks out there for tuning in. And if you have not already, please feel free to subscribe to this channel. Now, if you're on the X, formerly known as Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it will be my pleasure to follow you right back. There's also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. Now, you can check it out. Drop a line and be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. So once again, fine folks, my name is William Martin, and I am signing off. And I'm saying take care and have yourselves a wonderful day.